Everybody ready to reconvene? This is tomorrow's. All right. There's some conversation going on about Lyme over here that I think is worth commenting on. Traditionally, recommendations for Lyme are made for the purpose of raising pH. We talked about pH and solubility and the idea that the only way nutrients are available is when the pH is in a certain range. And so what that means is that traditionally there's no distinction made between calcitic lime and dolomitic lime. One is calcium carbonate, one is calcium magnesium carbonate. Actually, dolomitic lime, the calcium magnesium carbonate, is considered to have a higher liming index. So when all of the things are considered to be equal, it is recommended conventionally, traditionally. One thing I didn't talk about with calcium and magnesium, this is part of the whole Albrecht analysis and definitely part of Reams's analysis, is that calcium and magnesium are different. They are, they've got different names. They have different effects. They have different size. If you've got tight soil, if your soil is, oops.
Sorry about that one.
I'm the one who broke it, not me, not you. Calcium is a larger atom than magnesium, and calcium is considered to flocculate your soil, which basically means to open up, to loosen your soil. And magnesium is considered to tighten your soil. So if you've got a clayey soil, which is tight, which doesn't have, if you can't fit your hand down into your ground, it's too tight. We didn't talk about air yet. I talked about water a lot, but I didn't really talk about air. You should figure as far as you can reach your hand down into your soil is about as far as the air can reach down into your soil. And you'd really like to be able to reach your hand down a good few inches, if not further, into your soil. Where you can't, your soil's tight, the last thing you want to add is magnesium. Dolomitic lime, where I live in Massachusetts, all the lime quarries are dolomite. So the only lime you can get is dolomitic lime. You can't get calcitic lime unless you're willing to go out of the state. And everybody's like, it's lime is lime. Why would I pay for, hauling it from New York State? Because you don't want tight soil unless you got sand. If you got sand, you want tight soil because otherwise, things wash out of it too fast. If you got clay soil, you want to have more calcium, you want more openness, you want looseness, right? So ag lime is generally whatever's cheapest. Right? Like whatever's $8 a ton is considered to be ag lime. It doesn't necessarily have a small particle size. It's kind of chunky. It's a really basic material. It is inexpensive. It will functionally raise your pH, but if you don't pay attention to whether it's got calcium in it or magnesium in it, you may have systemic negative effects over time that you really wish you didn't have because you didn't know the difference. So that's an important point there about limestone, is that dolomitic lime will compact your soil, make it tighter. The calcitic lime will loosen your soil, make it more aerated. And air is at least as important as water in the function of life. Anybody? Aragonite is calcite, is a calcium. Aragonite is old seashells, pretty much, whereas limestone is more the diatoms. I think the aragonite is more seashells. They're both from the ocean. Yeah. I haven't used crab shells. I think they've got phosphorus in them too, I think. Yeah. I'm not sure. Do they? I don't have experience. I should know more than I do. Okay. What's that?
Wasn't it on our notes from last night,
No shoulds?
no should.
I didn't make.
So
I didn't
know
take
more
notes.
than I do.
I
Remember last night you said it's not about you shall or shall not.
well, shall and should
not.
maybe it'd be different. I don't know. I'm regularly reminded of my ignorance, and so I perhaps framed it incorrectly.
No one laughs at my jokes anyway. I have my own sense of
There, I
humor.
laughed for you. Okay, good.
I get to laugh at myself.
As long as you're laughing, there's nothing else. You can't control it. You can't control anything else. So, anyone else? So we go from inoculation, which is one of the simplest and I would suggest most powerful and least expensive things you can do, to seed quality, which is far from easy to address, but is also very significantly important. And I don't think there's any good, easy answers to it. A lot of the issues we have written up here have to do with seed, and we'll talk about those as we review those questions later. My understanding is that traditional cultures considered their seed to be one of their most valuable aspects. Their cultural wisdom, their viability going forward, really verging on sacred seed. And my experience in this culture is that seed is almost entirely commodified, and we don't even have a concept that there's a difference in seed. I know as a younger farmer myself, I would look at seed catalogs and I'd be looking at, red Brandywine tomatoes or purple Brandywine tomatoes, whatever, and I would see purple Brandywine in this catalog for $1.10 a packet, and purple Brandywine in this catalog for $1.50 a packet. And why would I spend the extra 40 cents? I'll always buy the cheaper seed. There's a lot of dumb things you can do. But buying poor quality seeds right up there at the top of the list, as far as I'm concerned. Buying seed in general might be a dumb thing to do, but most of us don't have our business together enough to actually be saving our own. Seed quality, seed history, seed vigor. I'll just give you a quick overview of how the industry works right now, and then we can talk about some of the logistics and what you can do. I got this information from talking to a guy named John Navazio, who's recently published a book on seed. He was a founder of the Organic Seed Alliance, worked out in the Pacific Northwest for 30 years as a seedsman. Now he's working for Johnny's. John Navazio, he gave me the example of, I think it was Thai spinach.
Can you spell his last name?
Novazio,
Novazio.
Novazio, John Novazio. He said, so there's, Thai is a hybrid, which means it belongs to a company, which means no one else is allowed to make it, to sell it, to raise it. So Thai there's 2 farms in Oregon that grow all the seed for the planet for the year. The company that owns the Thai seed contracts with those 2 farms, and then when they grow the seed, they harvest the plants and give all the seed back to the company, and that's it. There's your supply for the year. The company then takes the seed and runs it through a series of what's called screens. The largest seed is taken out. There's different size screens. So like a 14 screen would be a larger size for a spinach seed. The 12s and the 14s are pulled out and sold to the farmers in the Salinas Valley that plant 50 acres of spinach at a time. They're the ones who have relationships with the company, and they're the best friends. They all live out there on the West Coast together, and all the biggest, heaviest, most vital seed you never have a chance at. End of conversation. It all goes to to these big farms in Salinas Valley. Then they keep putting it through the screens. The stuff that's the 10 screen stuff will then be sold maybe to farmers who buy 50 pounds of seed at a time, maybe in New York State or something. And then they'll continue to screen it, and everything that's 8 screen is the stuff that will germinate. Anything below 8 probably won't germinate, and so that's the trash. But all the 8 screen seed is what the packet trade buys. So if you buy your seed in packets, anybody who sells it in packets buys it in big bags and puts it in packets and puts their label on it and sells it to you, right? This is how it works. So the packet trade, they buy the stuff that will germinate because it costs less, and then they mark it up as much as they can. This is the way the industry works. as I understand it, full stop, end of conversation. What's that?
We have a local seed, company called Southern Exposure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about the business, I think they obviously use some back on.
I'm aware of Southern Exposure, yeah.
I don't know, I mean, they do have package, but I don't think they
They're our neighbors, they
do
live
it
right
the
behind us.
same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Ira knows a lot and is a great seed saver. I'm not saying anything bad about her, she's a friend.
Yeah.
But they've gotten so big so fast that they are using farmer here, farmer there, farmer somewhere else
Yeah,
to grow their seed.
right,
Without the hands-on supervision that they used to have.
yep,
Twin Oaks is where it is, it's
Yeah.
Acorn and Twin Oaks.
yeah.
And they've lost a lot of control. I used to buy a lot of seed from them, and I've struggled with it
Recently.
recently because I'm not getting the quality.
The vigor you'd
I'm not
like.
getting the variety.
Also,
Yeah.
details.
Yeah, details.
Seed is a really big issue.
But
Seed is a really big issue, and we don't talk about it, we don't think about it, we don't want to talk about it. We really need to talk about seed as far as I'm concerned, so pardon me if I want to rant for the next 10 minutes.
Just want to say before we move on that there's definitely a major difference between like a grassroots seed cooperative where groups of farmers in the same region are partnering with one another and on those different places, in their respective places are growing different things out
Mhm.
because that's the nature of seed production, you know, certain distances of separation and so forth.
If you
And
want to
it's
have
cooperating.
varieties
Yeah.
that are all exactly the same,
Sure.
which is not how humans have been doing it for a long time. Traditionally, humans did what was called landrace, which was they would take some of the early, some of the middle, some of the late, some of the drought resistant, some of the flood resistant, and they keep it all together. I don't know. Yes, I understand the logistics of uniformity
All
that have
all
been.
I mean to point out is the difference between a small seed cooperative
Yeah.
and like a corporate mess,
Mhm.
you know, which is that situation where those two farmers that are really big in Oregon
Yeah.
are the only ones growing that.
But the point is, a small seed cooperative might be just as much of a mess.
they don't know what they're doing.
There's the what are they called in Iowa? The Seed Savers Exchange?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, they've got thousands of people growing seed and saving seed and sending it back in. We were talking about epigenetics a little bit earlier. I'm aware of a study that was done at the University of Iowa, or Iowa State, I can't remember which one, in Iowa. They took the prize-winning sow from the Iowa State Fair, I think it was done in the 70s. The prize-winning sow was like the best conformity, she's a hot little number, good-looking pig, right? And they said, what's the effect of nutrition on genetics? And they said, we're going to feed this optimal genetics pig poorly and see what happens. It took 2 generations to get down to downer pigs, right? Her grand piglets were the kind of pigs that couldn't stand up without breaking their legs. It took 2 generations to wear out the DNA. Oh, wow, interesting. And they said, what'll happen if we take these downer pigs and start feeding them well? It took 2 generations to get back to prize-winning form. The effect of nutrition on physiological development is categorical. This is what Albrecht was noticing with the World War I, draft records and the soil types, was what the boys were eating and maybe what their parents were eating when their mothers were eating, when they were pregnant, etc., had a massive effect on their physiological development. So for me, the issue is who is growing the mother plants and how are they growing them? We know about early childhood development. We know about the effect of the nutritional status of the mother on the health of the baby. I don't think we take this into consideration. Whether it's big corporate farms or local seed savers, my understanding is that the reason you can't get a lot of organic seed is because organic seed savers can't get the plants to go to the full life cycle without them being taken out by disease.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? They simply can't.
Stop, we're gonna change it.
What's that?
We're gonna change it.
Well, this is a really important topic. It's exactly what we're going to do.
Doesn't mean
Is we're going to start helping farmers grow healthy mother plants and help them save their seed so we can share it. I mean, the vigor of the seed is such a massively important piece of the puzzle. It's such a massively important piece of the puzzle, and you can have otherwise mediocre environmental conditions and have good, healthy seed, and really, get results you don't deserve, right? And with good, healthy seed, with really vigorous seed, you can get results in mediocre environmental conditions. And what's going on is we have mediocre environmental conditions and crappy quality seed. And we're struggling year after year after year because we're putting down seed that's weak. As far as I'm concerned, this is my experience. And I've begun to experiment with saving seed and planting seed and growing seed out one generation saves on my farm and seeing results that are stupefying, absolutely stupefying, as far as increases in yield, increases in vigor, increases in vitality, through nothing else than letting my plants go to seed and pulling them up and shaking the seed out on a piece of plastic and then planting it. Right? It doesn't need to be complicated, but my experience is that a lot of what you get from the store is stuff that was jacked up on NP and K, organic or otherwise, right? Conventionally fed. They weren't running on IV drip. They were running on Gatorade. They were not running on food. Their mothers were not healthy mothers, right? They were sprayed regularly to keep the fungus at bay. That's like having cancer and being on chemotherapy while you're pregnant, right? Would you want your grandchild to be born from a woman who's on chemotherapy while she's pregnant? Now, that grandchild's going to be in rough shape. You don't think about the health of the mother plant and what the effects are on the seed you're getting. For me, this is a really big deal, and it's kind of intuitive. It kind of is like, okay, duh. And I don't hear people talking about it, and I don't know if it's like willful ignorance or we simply haven't put the pieces together. I have been calling up and hassling all the seed companies that I know. I haven't talked to Southern Exposure. I've talked to Baker Creek. I've talked to Johnny's. I've talked to Fedco. I've talked to High Mowing. I've talked to, I think those are the biggest ones I've talked to. There's a couple little ones, Turtle Tree and things like that I've talked to. But there does not seem to be an interest in the seed industry in providing seed from mother plants that are operating at a high level of vigor and vitality. It's about volume. And a friend of mine actually, who is a really good agronomist, and he's a consultant, was working, one of his clients was a tomato seed grower. And we had been going back and forth about seed and the importance of seed. And he's like, I'm going to put together a protocol that's going to be awesome for seed. And he did. And his customer, applied it and grew some amazing tomato seed and sent it in, and it got sent back because it was too big.
Right.
It was too big.
That happened to our asparagus. They won't buy our asparagus because
It's too big. Too much vitality. You can't, if you're selling by the seed and you're buying by the pound, you lose money if you're selling high quality seed. It's simply not economics, right? I mean, this perverse. It is perverse. As I understand it, there is no, what's that?
It's not, at least in corn and grains, like, if you have a higher chest weight, more minerally dense plant, you're
Yeah.
gonna have a higher chest weight, more,
The larger the seed, the more,
you're gonna get.
the few, you want
basically
as
selling
few
less.
bushels, as few seeds per
Fewer
bushel.
seeds, the
As-
same amount of pounds,
Mhm.
it's in the grower's favor, but you're saying that the seed companies for small packets are selling a certain X number of seeds in a packet, so if they're buying by the pound, it's disincentivized.
Yeah.
your safe seeds. Anyone else safe seeds? We're in our 15th year.
It's really important to save seed, and there's a bunch of good people doing it. And it doesn't take many good people that have been doing it for a while to start working together.
Do a few varieties, but
I won't do a few things. That's all. I don't do anywhere near everything I should. But I got my son doing it. He thinks it's cool. I give him lots of positive reinforcement, and he's like out there and he's saving his seed.
I gotta ask you a quick question.
Shoot.
All about saving seed, how people walk.
it's so easy.
My grandpa, he used to mail one old paper plate on newspaper.
Nothing complicated about it.
Right, that's what he did.
You don't need to do. I did this experiment with arugula seed because I grow a lot of salad greens. And my experience buying arugula seed is like, it's a pain in the butt to grow arugula. I don't use nitrogen on my farm. I don't use compost. I don't use fish. I don't use nitrogen because I think that 2/3 of the atmosphere is nitrogen or 3/4 of the atmosphere is nitrogen, and you shouldn't need to use nitrogen.
Right.
Anybody who uses nitrogen, is violating nature. You should not need to use nitrogen, so I don't do it, even though if I did, I get better yields. I just have this little thing about nitrogen. And it's really hard to get arugula to grow without giving it nitrogen. It turns yellow, it turns purple, it just does not have vigor. It sits there and it stunts if it's not optimal conditions. So I did this experiment a couple years ago. I bought 4 pounds of arugula seed from Johnny's, and I planted 3 of them, and I kept 1 back. And I picked those 3. I picked them 3 pounds. I picked them 4 or 5 times, whatever it was, till the next planting came on, and then I just let them be. Didn't do anything. Didn't mow them, till them, plant anything else. Just let them be. Let them go to seed. And when they got up to go on to seed, and the seed pods formed, and the seed pods filled, and the seed pods dried down, I just pulled the plants up out of the ground and got an old piece of greenhouse plastic and shook them out on the greenhouse plastic, and then poured that into a quart container and planted that seed next to the pound that I'd kept back. This is just my own little experiment. I knew it was the same batch. I knew it was the same genetics, except 1 generation on my land. And the difference was categorical. The increase in vigor, vitality, speed of growth, thickness of leaf, size of leaf, lack of purpling, lack of yellowing, it was absolutely categorical. It was just mind-blowing, the increase in vitality that I got by doing nothing more than not tilling under a crop that was gone by. Right? So if you come to my farm in the summertime, you'll see hoop houses that, like, why aren't you growing anything in your hoop house? It's all weeds in here. No, it's not weeds. It's all greens gone to seed. Right? I just let them be. Just let them be. Don't do anything. Don't bother them. I don't need the space. Call it a cover crop if you want to call it a cover crop. Call it a fallow ground if you want to call it fallow ground. I'm just letting my crops go to seed and letting them be. So it doesn't need to be very difficult, right? People have been saving seed for a long time with all kinds of fancy systems and everything else. It doesn't need to be hard. There's ways you can sort seed by you can sort it by size pretty rapidly. Just one minor comment, and I'll answer some questions. I was talking to a guy at Johnny's when I was hassling seed companies about this a couple of years ago, and saying, I honestly couldn't figure out whether they didn't know, were honestly ignorant, or they were just didn't want to talk about it, or what was going on. And I kept asking, I was asking all these questions, and they're like, well, I'll put you under my boss. And then like, I'll put you under my boss. And I finally got somebody who's like up there in Johnny's. And I was asking him about this. And he's like, sometimes we have Bolero carrots at 100,000 seeds per pound, and sometimes we have Bolero carrots at 800,000 seeds per pound. I'm like, what? He's like, but they all germinate. I'm like, it doesn't matter if they germinate, it matters if they have vigor. Anybody ever planted tomatoes and like a few germinate 5 or 6 days after you plant them, and then 2 weeks goes by, or maybe 2 weeks after you plant them, they all germinate? Mm-hmm. Those are the runts. The ones that germinated at 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? The runts are 95% of the litter in the seeds you get. They've either sorted out all the good ones, or there was no good ones to begin with. The How to Grow World Record Tomatoes book guy, he's really, really clear about this. You find the biggest seeds, and only the biggest seeds, the heaviest seeds, and those are the ones you plant. If you take a seed packet of tomatoes and you pull them out and you look at them on your hand, you take the fat ones and you plant them here, and you take the flat ones and you plant them there, you'll see these ones germinate in 5 days, 7 days, these ones germinate in 14 days. You can absolutely predict it. And you can grow them all the way out, and you can see which ones have vigor and which ones don't. Sorry, yes.
Totally tracking with you. I'm just going to list 3 people who would be interested in getting if you want seed from somebody who's doing what he's talking about.
Yes.
The only person I met, and I know there are a couple more, but the only person I met on the East Coast who's doing that is Will Bonsall.
Is he doing it?
Who's in Maine.
Yeah.
He talks all the time about selecting for vigor. It's one of his primary criteria.
Okay.
And then Roan White at Sierra Seeds in Northern California, and Don Tipping at Siskiyou Seeds in Oregon.
I've heard about Siskiyou. Yeah.
That's a cooperative as well.
I talked to, who was the lettuce guy? Frank Morton about this, about nutrition and stuff. And Frank was like, yeah, I use compost and limestone. I was like, Frank Morton?